Pantry Restock Day. I've organized my pantry. It's still looking great. I'm so excited to report. If you have not seen that video, I'm gonna link it up above. Go check it out. But now it's time to actually put all of that homemade goodness back into my pantry. My kids and my family have eaten pretty much everything that we have. I feel like we never have what we need on hand these days. And so it was time for a pantry restock day. And that is today. I'm gonna do a giant marathon where I will make all of our favorite pantry staples. We are doing this for a number of reasons. Number one, it saves us a trip to the grocery store. I think that maybe even more than the spending at the grocery store, for us at least, it's the hassle of actually having to leave the homestead, go to the store, even though it's really not that far. But I think in our mind, it just feels like such a hassle. Get in the car, get the kids in the car, drive there, find the thing, buy it, bring it back home. And it's almost easier to make it. Number two, obviously the spending. I would much rather take that money, spend it on something else, rather than be endlessly shoveling money to those giant grocery stores where food comes, I don't even know where from. And for pantry staples especially, it's almost impossible for us to buy that local from like somebody like a small local business. It virtually doesn't exist. Lastly, the health benefits. When we make things at home, the ingredients are so much better. I know exactly what goes in it. Most of it is always sourdough if it's anything baked. So without any further ado, let's get to stocking our pantry. I hope that you find some inspiration for what you can make at home to keep your pantry stocked and your family's belly nice and full. One thing that I absolutely love about making granola is you can be so creative. I have a recipe that I'm following. It's up on my blog. I'll link it in the description box below. But there is so much creativity within it. So once you have all the basic ingredients in, like I do, you can just pretty much go to town with whatever you have on hand or with whatever you feel like including in your granola and making super custom, super personalized just for you. So let's go do it.
When you take a look at the recipe on my blog that I will link in the description box below, you will see that the recipe calls for maple syrup. Shortly after I got started on my pantry restock, I realized I am painfully low on maple syrup, so I used whatever I had. And then I just decided to get creative and I substituted molasses for maple syrup. It worked. You can see me using up the last little bit over there. It worked pretty well. It actually added this really deep, beautiful taste, like caramel-like taste to the granola. So I really enjoyed it. Another note that I wanted to mention is you can feel free to use a KitchenAid to mix everything just like I am, or you can mix it by hand. My granola ended up being pretty dense, which actually was not a problem at all because it made it really nice and crunchy. This is probably because I used molasses instead of maple syrup, and also I used discards that has been sitting in my fridge for quite some time, and so it is not as liquidy as it is at the beginning. So if you need a hand with the mixing process, definitely use your KitchenAid or just feel free to whip it up by hand. This granola goes super well with some homemade yogurt. If you've been wanting to try to make your own homemade yogurt, or maybe you make it already, but you're not really happy with the results, stay tuned because I have upgraded my homemade yogurt recipe to absolute perfection, and I will be sharing the entire process with you here today.
Next up are my favorite oatmeal sourdough cookies. They're basically a variation of the granola recipe, slightly different, but in cookie form, which makes for a great quick snack if the boys need it. They're very low on sugar, so they're healthy-ish. You know, sourdough, added sourdough, and anything you make is healthy. Just kidding, wish that was the case, but better than the alternative for sure. These are one of the hits on my blog and on my Pinterest especially. People have been absolutely loving those. This is a tried and tested recipe I've been making for a long time. It's probably one of my oldest recipes on my blog, and I haven't made it for the boys in a while. So let's get to it.
Mama?
Hello, you inside already? Where's Papa? I am using molasses again in this recipe because of my maple syrup situation. One of my favorite things about basically all of the recipes that I'm making today, maybe with a few small exceptions, is that you can just modify them whichever way you like. This does not have to be super rigid. If you run out of something, you can substitute it with something else. This definitely goes for all of the additions, for the granola and the cookies, and even some of the recipes that are coming up. But even for some of the key ingredients, if you do not have maple syrup or molasses, you can use honey. Alternatively, you could use sugar, although I'm trying to stay away from that. But in a pinch, you totally could, and nothing is going to change except for maybe the final consistency of the cookies, which I've had happen a little bit, but let's wait and see how they turn out this time. Tastes really good. One of the best things about sourdough is obviously that it's fermented, which means that it is much easier to digest, hence potentially healthier. Great for people who have a gluten sensitivity because the gluten gets consumed in the fermentation process. But on a more practical note, if you don't have a gluten sensitivity, I love the flexibility that it offers. So at this point, you have two options. You can either let this sit out in your kitchen in a warm environment for an hour or two to speed up the fermentation process, then just refrigerate it for about 30 minutes and you can bake right away. But maybe you're like me and you have a giant Pantry restock day, and maybe you're not sure that you're going to get to baking them today, but you still want them to be fermented. So what I'm going to do now is I'll just cover it with some foil and pop it in the fridge overnight, but it can stay there for 2 days or 3 days. The longer it stays, the more it'll ferment and the better it'll get. So it'll be totally fine, and it's flexible. It can accommodate me and my schedule, and when I get to it is when I get to it. My family goes through a crazy amount of yogurt. So much so that actually our dairy cow's milk production is not sufficient. No, we do not have a Jersey cow yet. I would love to have a Jersey cow. It is on the list. And if my boys continue eating yogurt and everything else at this rate, then we are gonna have to get one possibly this year. We have a Jersey/Highland mix. I was really nervous about getting a cow that makes so much milk right from the get-go. So we opted for this so that I could learn how to, milk a cow consistently, make all the things. Yeah, we need more milk. But one of the hacks that I've been doing for way before we even had a cow, I was buying milk off of friends or small businesses, or we actually have a milk dispenser here in our village, which is really cool. And I am making my own yogurt. I think this is the best hack. Not only do I know 100% that the only thing in there is milk, it is so much cheaper And once again, yogurt's one of those things that just always runs out in our house so fast because they eat so much of it. And this way, we always have some on hand, and if we do, I just make some more. I have a recipe up on my blog. I'll link it in the description box below. It is perfect if you're a beginner and you have an Instapot. If you're a beginner and you're a little nervous about making yogurt, you want something easy that'll work, and you don't really want to touch it a whole lot, but you want yogurt, use that one. You can make it with pasteurized milk or with raw milk. I will note, however, especially when using raw milk, sometimes the results are not consistent. So one time you will get wonderfully creamy yogurt, another time it will be clumpy. This started to bother me. And so I tested a bunch of different recipes, and I found and perfected a new, more advanced yogurt making recipe. It requires a few more steps. You can still use the Instapot to make it. I now make it in my nifty little fermentation box that I have, proofing box over there that doubles up as a slow cooker. You can totally use an Instapot to make it too, but the results are just so good, so creamy every single time. And today I'm finally going to show you exactly how I make it.
All right, on to the yogurt making. Like I mentioned, this recipe has a few more steps, but it's absolutely worth it. You will also need a thermometer, similar to the one that I'm using over here. It can be a meat thermometer or some thermometer that's for cooking. You could even use a canning thermometer, but you cannot do this recipe without one. So first things first, you will add your milk to a large pot and heat it up until it reaches 180 degrees. My thermometer has a really fun function on there where it'll alert me when it is up to temp. I'm pretty sure most thermometers have that. It is so useful in this case. And just leave it be. Now, while I'm waiting for my milk to heat up, I'm whipping up some quick homemade mayo. This is such a simple recipe. There are very few ingredients. All you need is some form of oil, avocado oil, sunflower oil. You could even use olive oil, although that can sometimes give your mayo a really strong taste. You need some mustard, a little bit of lemon juice, some salt, an egg, and an immersion blender, and that is it. A really fast way to make healthy homemade mayo that the whole family will love. I am going to link the recipe in the description box below. This is an absolute must-have if you've adjusted to the mindset of making things from scratch. You are committed to only bringing in clean ingredients to your family, your fridge, and you maybe also want to save some dollars along the way. As you can hear, my thermometer just went off. My milk is up to temp, 180 degrees Fahrenheit. I will now take the entire pot and place it into a bowl of ice cold water. I add some extra ice cubes in there and cool it down to 110 degrees. Now the chances are you're gonna have to bring in fresh ice and fresh ice cold water several times. When your milk is cooled down to 110, ladle some of it off into a small jar or a bowl and add in about half a cup of your starter yogurt. Now this can either be whatever you have left over from the previous batch, or you can use store-bought organic yogurt. Mix really well until it's fully dissolved and incorporated, and then added to your large bowl of or pot of milk. Stir really well again. You want the yogurt to be equally spread throughout the entire liquid. Now, at this point, you can either use an Instapot, which is what I always used to do, except that I skipped all these steps beforehand. If you want my original simple beginner yogurt recipe, I'm going to link it in the description box below. Or you can do what I do now, which is I use my proofing box, which doubles up as a slow cooker and is actually really great for fermenting dairy, among many other things. What I love about it the most is that your yogurt can ferment directly in the jars. So here you can see I'm pouring my milk directly into the jars, and I will pop those into my slow cooker. And when they're all done, all I have to do is just move them in the fridge. If you don't have a proofing box, all you do is just pour your milk into your Instant Pot and click the yogurt setting. If you're using a proofing box like me, set it to about 90 degrees for roughly 8 hours and stay tuned for the result. Pantry restock day really took it out of me. I had other things I needed to do that afternoon, and so I decided to finish off the following day. Like I mentioned, this is one of the reasons why I love sourdough so much, because even though I had already made the batter for my cookies, it didn't really matter. I would just leave them to ferment a little bit longer in the fridge and everything would be just fine. So I'm starting out by baking my oatmeal cookies that I prepped the previous day. They end up turning out more like cookie balls than actual like discs. And like I mentioned earlier, this is probably because I used older discard that was very solid, as well as molasses. They were also in the fridge for a longer amount of time. I totally could have set them out and let them come closer to room temp. But honestly, this was just so convenient for me. It did not affect the flavor at all. They're absolutely delicious. And if anything, I felt like they were crumbling a lot less and keeping shape, which is really practical when you're feeding them to the little ones. Let's go check how my yogurt turned out. I think it is absolutely amazing. Now you can see it's still a little bit liquidy. That's just because it needs to congeal and cool off in the fridge. Like I said, using this method, your yogurt will turn out really nice and creamy every single time. Also, look how many jars of yogurt I have right now. To say that this is a convenience and totally worth the effort is an understatement. Next up, one of my family's new favorites, sourdough crackers. One thing that my boys really enjoy, and I honestly do too, are savory, crunchy snacks. We used to buy these in quite large quantities. We always opted for the healthier ones at the store, until I was just so fed up with having to buy them and then having all the wrappers all around and running out, and I said no more. And I came up with this delicious sourdough cracker recipe that, just like everything else I'm making today, there are endless ways to customize it, to add in different flavors, herbs, and additions. I'm making a very simple version today with just some herbs because it is absolutely delicious and my boys love it. I will link the full recipe for these crackers in the description box below. But once you are done shaping your dough, it is so important to refrigerate it. This is what's going to make the crackers so delicious and crunchy. And so while my crackers are chilling in the fridge, I am going to move on to the next project and whip up a quick batch of sauerkraut. Sauerkraut is so amazing for your gut and immunity. It's another fermented food, which means it's easier to digest than fresh cabbage would be, but it also contains so many gut-loving bacteria. If you grow your own cabbage, which we do, but this cabbage is unfortunately store-bought, it is also a wonderful way to preserve your cabbage harvest for later. I actually don't have a sauerkraut recipe up on my blog, and I don't know, would you guys like to see it? Let me know in the comments below, and maybe I can get one up there. Crackers are still chilling in the fridge, so I'm moving on to the next item. Remember when I made homemade mayo just a while ago? Well, one of the reasons why I love making it so regularly is because I use it as a building block in a ton of other recipes. So right now I'm going to whip up some homemade ranch that my kids love as a side for pretty much anything, especially drizzled over some chicken meat. We obviously raise our own chickens, so we have an abundance of chicken meat, but it also goes great on salads and obviously as a dip for vegetables or just about everything and anything else. The recipe is super simple. You are going to peel and press some garlics and then mix them with sour cream. I'm actually out of sour cream, and in the spirit of substitutions, I am using yogurt instead. You will add in your mayo, spices and herbs, and you are done. It's literally that easy and so delicious. The herbs that I like to use are usually dill, green onions, onion powder, sometimes garlic powder, and I change this up according to what I'm going to be serving this with, how I feel, or what I have on hand. crackers are ready to come out of the fridge and go into the oven. The rest of the process with the crackers is super straightforward. You just roll them out into as thin a layer as you possibly can. My pro tip is to do it directly on the parchment paper that you're going to be using for baking them. Cut them up into little squares or really any shapes. You could even use cookie cutters and make fun shaped crackers. And then if you want that typical cracker look, use a fork and fork little tiny dots into each and every single cracker. You certainly don't have to do this, but I find that it looks really nice and is totally worth the effort. Phew, we are on to the last item of the day, kombucha. I have been making kombucha for years and years, much longer than I've been baking sourdough, actually. So if you're new to kombucha and you feel intimidated, I totally understand. The kombucha SCOBY can look so outlandish and weird, but once you understand the basic principle behind it, and it's once again fermentation, so if you're familiar with fermenting anything else, this will come to you really easily. Making kombucha is so easy, and making your own variations and flavors is super fun. So all you need is a kombucha SCOBY. You can either buy this online, Amazon sells them now, or you can get them on Facebook Marketplace or have them gifted from a friend. If you look at my SCOBY over here, it had grown so much. There are so many new layers, and I did not even want to be putting that whole thing in there, so I divided mine up. There are 2 stages of fermentation when you're making kombucha. The first stage, which is what I'm doing over here, is called bulk fermentation. And then the second stage, where you actually add flavor to your kombucha tea. I have a whole book for beginners all about kombucha making that's going to explain both of those steps, walk you through all the equipment that you need and everything else that you can possibly think of that goes into kombucha making, and it'll help you make your first brew easily, taking out all the guesswork. I'm going to link it in the description box below. Feel free to grab your copy. Thank you so much for joining me for this pantry restock today. I would love to hear what are some of your favorite pantry items that you make from scratch so that maybe I can add them to my list. Please let me know in the comments down below this video. If you enjoyed this video, please hit the subscribe button so you never miss a new one. I post a new video every single week. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you again next week.